The rifle crack echoed across the barren valley as Milo Stellan dove behind the rusted shell of an ancient pickup truck. Dust exploded around him, kicked up by bullets that came too close. His ceremonial robes, the flowing blue and silver that marked him as a cloud seeder, were now torn and stained with sweat. "There!" shouted one of the raiders from Clearwater Settlement. "The fraud's hiding behind the ford." Milo clutched the metal cylinder strapped to his chest, his seating apparatus, the source of his supposed divine gift. His fingers found the activation switch, and he pressed it without thinking. A fine mist hissed from the device, dispersing into the scorching air. "You want rain?" Milo called out, his voice carrying the practiced authority that had made him legendary across the drought zone. "Then stop shooting at the man who brings it." Above them, clouds began to gather with unnatural speed. Dark, pregnant with moisture, they swirled in patterns that defied the wind. The raiders' gunfire faltered as shadows fell across the cracked earth. Thunder rumbled, low and promising. "Impossible," one of them whispered. Milo stood slowly, his arms spread wide as the first drops began to fall. The rain came harder, drumming against the metal truck and raising the rich scent of petrichor from the thirsty ground. The raiders lowered their weapons, their anger dissolving into something like awe. "The water you drink in Clearwater," Milo said, his voice carrying over the downpour, "where do you think it comes from? The wells you've drilled for generations? They've been dry for 20 years. He gestured to the growing storm above. "This is the only water that matters now. And I am the only one who can call it." The raiders retreated, backing away from the miracle they'd witnessed. But Milo saw something else in their eyes beyond wonder, a hungry desperation that made his skin crawl. They would be back, probably with more people, more guns. Everyone wanted what he had, and they were willing to kill for it. As the rain soaked through his robes, Milo allowed himself a bitter smile. If only they knew the truth, that he had no idea how any of this worked. 3 weeks later, Milo stood before the Council of Haven's Rest, the largest settlement in the drought zone. The council chamber, really just a reinforced shipping container with windows cut into the sides, buzzed with tension. Outside, the settlement's 3,000 residents waited for news of their water allocation. "The northern sectors are completely dry," Council leader Sarah Chen announced, her weathered face grim. "The underground rivers that fed our wells have disappeared. Without your intervention, Mr. Stellan, we'll be forced to relocate within a month." Milo nodded gravely, though inside he felt the familiar knot of anxiety. His gift had been growing stronger over the past 5 years, but he still didn't understand it. The device had simply appeared on his doorstep one morning, along with a note claiming he was chosen. Since then, rain followed wherever he went, and his reputation had grown beyond anything he'd ever imagined. The note had been simple, written on expensive paper that seemed out of place in the drought zone: "You have been selected for a great purpose. Use the device when clouds gather. Bring hope to the hopeless." It was signed only with a corporate logo he didn't recognize, 3 interlocking circles beneath stylized storm clouds. Over the years, he'd tried to research the symbol, but the settlement's limited internet access had yielded nothing. He'd assumed it was some remnant of the old government's weather modification programs, abandoned during the climate wars and left for him to discover. The romantic notion had appealed to him, a former insurance adjuster from Phoenix chosen by fate to become humanity's salvation. "I'll need 3 days to prepare," he said, falling back on the ritual that had served him well. "The atmospheric conditions must be precisely right." The chamber door burst open, and 2 corporate security officers in white hazmat suits entered. Behind them came a woman Milo had never seen before, tall, pale, with the kind of surgical precision to her features that marked her as someone from the climate cities, where medical enhancements were commonplace. "Milo Stellan," she said, her voice carrying a slight electronic distortion from the speaker in her suit. "I'm Director Elena Vasquez from Atmospheric Solutions Corporation. You're coming with us." The council members rose in alarm. "This is sovereign territory," Sarah Chen protested. "You have no authority." "We have a federal mandate," Director Vasquez cut her off, producing a tablet that displayed official seals and signatures. Mr. Stellan is operating equipment that belongs to our corporation. Equipment that was never authorized for field deployment. Milo's hand instinctively went to the cylinder on his chest. I don't know what you're talking about. This was given to me. By us. Vasquez's smile was sharp. 5 years ago. And now we're recalling it. The security officers moved toward Milo, but Sarah Chen stepped between them. You can't just take him. The entire region depends on him for water. The region depends on our technology, Vasquez corrected. Technology that Mr. Stellan has been using without proper oversight or safety protocols. Do you have any idea what you've been breathing these past 5 years? What you've been drinking? Before anyone could respond, alarms began blaring throughout the settlement. Through the chamber's windows, Milo could see people running, pointing at the sky. Dark clouds were forming overhead, not the natural, rain-heavy clouds that followed his seating, but something else. Something wrong. The clouds writhed like living things, and where they touched the ground, plants withered instantly. A child's scream cut through the air as a tendril of the dark mist reached down and turned a small garden to ash in seconds. What is that? Milo demanded, but Director Vasquez was already backing toward the door, her officers flanking her. Side effects, she said. The nanites were never meant to operate this long without maintenance. They're beginning to malfunction. Nanites? The word hit Milo like a physical blow. What nanites? But Vasquez was already gone, her security team surrounding her as they evacuated. Milo watched through the window as their white transport lifted off, abandoning the settlement to whatever horror was descending from the poisoned sky. Sarah Chen grabbed his arm. Milo, what is she talking about? What are nanites? Milo stared at the device on his chest, the source of his power, his identity, his entire life for the past 5 years. I don't know, he whispered. But I think we need to find out before this kills everyone. The dark clouds continued to spread, and in their shadow, the last green things in Haven's Rest began to die. Milo's jeep hit a pothole hard enough to rattle his teeth as he raced through the abandoned industrial district outside Haven's Rest. Behind him, the settlement's lights were fading into the distance, obscured by the unnatural storm that continued to spread from the poisoned clouds. He'd left in the middle of the night, driven by Sarah Chen's final words, "Find answers, or don't come back." The device on his chest felt heavier now, like a weight pressing down on his ribs. Every few minutes, it would emit a soft beep and release another small puff of mist. Whatever the nanites were, they were still working, still doing something he didn't understand. The road ahead split into 3 directions. To the left lay the scraplands, where desperate communities picked through the ruins of the old world. Straight ahead stretched the dead highway, leading to the distant climate cities where Director Vasquez had surely retreated. But to the right. Milo turned right, following a barely visible path that wound through a forest of dead trees. According to the maps, there was supposed to be a research station somewhere in these hills, abandoned years ago when the droughts first began. If he was going to understand what was happening to him, he needed to start where the science had died. The trees gave way to a valley filled with the concrete shells of laboratory buildings. Milo parked at the edge of the complex and approached on foot, his boots crunching through layers of dead leaves and debris. Most of the structures were clearly abandoned, their windows dark and doors hanging open. But one building showed signs of recent activity. A faint glow from within, and tracks in the dust leading to its entrance. Milo pushed open the door and stepped inside. The lobby was filled with overturned furniture and scattered papers, but a light was visible down a hallway. He followed it, his hand resting on the pistol Sarah Chen had insisted he carry. "Hello?" he called out. "Is anyone there?" "Depends," came a voice from the shadows. "Are you here to arrest me or kill me?" A figure stepped into the light, a woman in her 50s with gray-streaked hair and clothes that looked like they'd been slept in for weeks. She was holding a tablet, and her eyes had the red-rimmed look of someone who'd been staring at screens for too long. "I'm looking for answers," Milo said. About atmospheric manipulation. About nanites. The woman's expression shifted from wariness to interest. Dr. Lex Moore, she said, extending a hand. Former chief meteorologist for the Department of Climate Engineering. And you're the famous cloud seeder, aren't you? Milo Stellan. Former meteorologist. Disgraced meteorologist, Lex corrected with a bitter laugh. I tried to warn them 5 years ago that the weather modification programs were having unintended consequences. They said I was paranoid, stripped my credentials, and blacklisted me from every research position in the climate cities. She gestured around the ruined laboratory. So I came here to continue my work in private. Milo pulled out the device and set it on a nearby table. Do you know what this is? Lexa's eyes widened as she examined the cylinder. Where did you get this? Someone left it on my doorstep. Said I was chosen. Chosen to be a test subject, Lex muttered, connecting her tablet to the device. Data began flowing across the screen, chemical formulas, atmospheric readings, deployment schedules. This is a third-generation atmospheric nanite dispenser. Military grade. The nanites are designed to bond with water molecules in the atmosphere and create localized precipitation events. So I really can make it rain? You can trigger the rain, yes. But look at this. Lex pointed to a series of readings on her screen. The nanites don't just create rain. They also destroy the natural processes that would normally produce it. Every time you activate this device, you're releasing billions of microscopic machines that attack naturally occurring cloud condensation nuclei. Milo felt cold despite the warm air. Meaning what? Meaning natural clouds can't form rain anymore. Not in areas where the nanites have been deployed. The only way to get precipitation is through artificial seeding, through devices like yours. Lexa's face was grave. Whoever gave you this turned you into a drug dealer, and the entire drought zone is addicted to what you're selling. Before Milo could respond, the sound of engines filled the air outside. Through the laboratory's windows, he could see lights approaching, not the yellow glow of settlement vehicles, but the harsh white beams of corporate transports. They found us, Lex whispered, quickly disconnecting her tablet and shoving it into a backpack. We need to go. Now. Explosions rocked the building as the corporate forces began their assault. Milo grabbed his device and followed Lex toward the back of the laboratory, where she'd apparently prepared an escape route through a hole blown in the rear wall. They crawled through just as the front entrance exploded inward. This way, Lex called, leading him toward a hidden vehicle, a modified electric bike that could carry 2 people. They climbed on just as searchlights began sweeping the area behind them. As they raced through the darkness, Milo shouted over the wind, "How long have they been watching me?" "Probably since the beginning," Lex replied. "You're not just their test subject, you're their proof of concept. If they can control the weather in one region, they can control it everywhere." The Clearwater settlement looked different in the harsh light of dawn. What had once been a thriving community of 1,000 people now showed signs of severe decline. The buildings were still standing, but many were empty, their windows dark. The central plaza, which should have been bustling with morning activity, held only a few dozen people. Milo and Lex approached carefully, leaving the electric bike hidden in a grove of dead trees outside the settlement's perimeter. They'd spent the night in an abandoned gas station, planning their approach while Lex ran diagnostics on Milo's device. The results had been disturbing. The nanites weren't just creating rain, they were actively consuming the microscopic particles that normally served as condensation nuclei for natural cloud formation. "It's like a biological weapon disguised as a miracle," Lex had explained, showing him readouts that meant nothing to him but clearly terrified her. The nanites replicate themselves using atmospheric moisture and organic compounds. Every time you activate the device, you're not just seeding clouds, you're breeding more nanites. Now, walking toward Clearwater's main gate, Milo felt the weight of that knowledge pressing down on him. How many billions of these microscopic machines had he released over the years? How far had they spread beyond the areas where he'd brought rain? "Remember," Lex said as they walked toward the main gate, We need their atmospheric data from the past 5 years. If I'm right about the nanite dispersal patterns, Clearwater should be showing the clearest evidence of ecological disruption. They've been outside your rain zones, so they should have the cleanest baseline readings. The guards at the gate recognized Milo immediately, and their hands went to their weapons. "You've got some nerve coming here," one of them said. "After what happened at Haven's Rest." "What happened at Haven's Rest?" Milo asked, though he was afraid he already knew. "The whole settlement's gone dark," the guard replied. "No communications, no trade convoys. Word is the crops all died overnight." He studied Milo with suspicious eyes. "Right after you showed up with your miracle rain." Lex stepped forward. "We're here to speak with your leadership about the weather manipulation that's been affecting this region. We have information that could help all of you." The guards exchanged glances, then one of them spoke into a radio. After a brief conversation, they were escorted through the settlement toward the administrative building. Milo noticed that many of the people they passed looked sick, pale, thin, with the hollow-eyed look of chronic malnutrition. Settlement leader Marcus Webb waited for them in his office, a sparse room decorated only with maps showing water sources and trade routes. He was a big man gone gaunt, his clothes hanging loose on a frame that had clearly once been much heavier. "Dr. Moore," he said, recognizing Lex immediately. "I followed your work before the government silenced you. And you." His gaze shifted to Milo. "You're either the greatest fraud in the drought zone or the most dangerous man alive." "Both, apparently," Milo replied. "I've been operating technology one don't understand, controlled by people I've never met." Lex spread her tablet on Webb's desk and began showing him the data they'd collected. The atmospheric nanites aren't just creating artificial rain, they're systematically destroying the natural water cycle. "Look at these precipitation maps from the past 5 years." Webb studied the data, his expression growing darker with each screen. "This shows natural rainfall dropping to 0 across the entire region. But there's something else here, atmospheric particle counts that don't make sense." "The nanites," Lex confirmed. "They're not just in the areas where Milo has been active. They're everywhere, spreading through natural air currents and replicating themselves. Look at these migration patterns." She pulled up a new screen showing wind patterns and particle distribution models. "The nanites have been spreading far beyond the drought zone. Based on these calculations, they've probably reached the eastern seaboard by now." Webb's face went ashen. "You're telling me this contamination is continental?" "Except where Milo has been active," Lex confirmed. "The nanites create a dependency loop. The more they're used, the more they're needed. And the more they spread, the larger the area that becomes dependent on artificial rain." Milo stared at the data, feeling sick. "How many people are we talking about? In 5 years?" Lex ran quick calculations on her tablet. "Potentially hundreds of millions. Maybe more." "But why?" Webb demanded. "Who benefits from turning the entire continent into a wasteland?" Before anyone could answer, alarms began blaring throughout the settlement. Webb grabbed a radio from his desk. "What's the situation?" "Corporate forces approaching from the south," came the crackling reply. 3 transports, full combat configuration." Webb looked at Milo and Lex grimly. "They followed you here." Through the office windows, they could see the white transports landing in the settlement's plaza. Corporate security forces poured out, their hazmat suits gleaming in the morning sun. Leading them was Director Vasquez, her face visible through the transparent faceplate of her helmet. "Attention residents of Clearwater Settlement," her amplified voice echoed across the buildings. "You are harboring fugitives who have stolen corporate property. Surrender them immediately and you will not be harmed." Webb grabbed a shotgun from behind his desk. "Like hell they won't be harmed. These corporate vultures have been picking at our bones for years." But Lex was already moving, grabbing her equipment and stuffing it into her backpack. "We need to get to their data center," she told Milo urgently. "If we can access their central systems, we can find out who's really behind this." The data center's in the old mining facility, Webb said. 5 miles north, built into the hillside. But it's heavily defended. Not as heavily as it will be if we wait, Milo replied, checking his weapon. They'll reinforce it once they realize what we're after. Explosions began rocking the settlement as corporate forces moved from building to building. Through the windows, they could see Clearwater's residents fighting back, but they were outgunned and outnumbered. Webb handed Lex a set of keys. Take my truck. And find a way to make this right. They escaped through a back window as corporate soldiers breached the front of the building. The truck was an old military vehicle, armored and powerful enough to crash through the settlement's rear fence. As they raced toward the hills, Milo looked back to see smoke rising from Clearwater's buildings. They're destroying everything, he said. Not everything, Lex replied grimly. Just the evidence. Behind them, explosions continued to rock the settlement. Milo watched in his side mirror as corporate forces methodically moved from building to building, setting charges and destroying anything that might contain atmospheric data. The message was clear: no one would be allowed to document what was really happening to the weather. How did they find us so fast? Milo asked. Lex tapped his device, which was still beeping regularly from his chest. I think they've been tracking you all along. The nanites don't just create rain, they probably transmit location data back to their controllers. Milo looked down at the device that had defined his life for 5 years. So I've been walking surveillance equipment this entire time. Walking, talking, rain-making surveillance equipment, Lex confirmed. The perfect way to monitor the effectiveness of their experiment while maintaining plausible deniability. As they reached the mining facility, Milo made a decision that surprised even himself. He began disconnecting the device from its harness. What are you doing? Lex asked. If they're tracking this thing, we need to ditch it before we go in, he said. I won't let them follow us into whatever trap we're walking into. But without the device, you're just a man, Milo finished. Maybe that's what I should have been all along. The mining facility's data center was built like a fortress, carved directly into the mountainside and surrounded by automated defense systems. Milo and Lex crouched behind a boulder on the ridge above it, studying the facility through binoculars as the sun began to set. 6 guard towers, motion sensors on all approaches, and at least 20 security personnel visible on the perimeter, Lex reported. Plus whatever's inside. Milo adjusted his device, noting that its beeping had become more frequent over the past few hours. The nanites are getting more active, he said. I think they're being remotely controlled. Or they're responding to proximity to their command center, Lex suggested. She pulled up a schematic on her tablet. If I'm right, the central processing unit should be in the deepest level of the facility. That's where we'll find out who's really behind this. They'd spent the afternoon planning their approach. The facility's defenses were designed to stop large-scale attacks, not infiltration by a small team. Lex had identified a maintenance tunnel that led from an old mine shaft directly into the lower levels of the data center. It would be dangerous, the tunnel might be collapsed or monitored, but it was their best chance. As they prepared their equipment, Milo found himself thinking about all the people who had looked to him for salvation over the past 5 years. The farmers who had praised him as their savior. The children who had laughed and played in the rain he brought. The communities that had rebuilt their lives around the water he provided. All of it based on a lie. All of it making the problem worse. The worst part wasn't the deception, it was how willingly he'd embraced it. Deep down, he'd always known something was wrong. The device was too advanced, too perfect, too conveniently delivered. But he'd wanted to be special, wanted to be the hero in humanity's darkest hour. So he'd ignored the inconsistencies and embraced the role of savior. Now, sitting on this ridge overlooking a corporate fortress, he realized how many people would pay the price for his willful blindness. Not just the people of the drought zone, but potentially millions across the continent who were breathing nanite-contaminated air without even knowing it. You're thinking too much, Lex said, checking her tablet one final time. We can't change what's already happened. We can only try to stop it from getting worse. How many people are going to die because of what I've done? Lex was quiet for a moment. Maybe all of them, she said finally. But definitely all of them if we don't try to fix this. And if we succeed? If we shut down the nanites? Then they'll die more slowly, from thirst instead of poison. She met his eyes. But at least their children might have a chance to see natural rain again. They made their way down the ridge as darkness fell, moving carefully through the scrub brush and loose rocks. The old mine shaft was exactly where Lex's maps indicated, a dark opening in the hillside, partially concealed by fallen timber. They switched on their headlamps and began the descent. The tunnel was in better condition than Milo had expected, with steel support beams and concrete walls that showed recent maintenance. Emergency lighting strips provided a dim glow every few hundred feet, suggesting the passage was still in use. "This isn't abandoned," Lex whispered. "Someone's been keeping it operational." They moved deeper into the mountain, following the tunnel as it curved and branched. Lex consulted her tablet frequently, using its compass and mapping functions to navigate the underground maze. After what felt like hours, they reached a heavy steel door marked with corporate security warnings. Lex produced a small device from her backpack, something that looked like a cross between a smartphone and a welding tool. "Electronic lock pick," she explained, attaching it to the door's access panel. "Courtesy of my days working for the government." The door clicked open, revealing a corridor lined with server racks and humming with electronic activity. They were inside the data center. The central processing chamber was a cathedral of technology, its walls lined with massive servers that reached toward a ceiling lost in shadows. In the center of the room stood a holographic display showing the entire drought zone, with weather patterns, population centers, and atmospheric nanite concentrations rendered in brilliant detail. But what caught Milo's attention was the figure standing before the display, not Director Vasquez, but a man in an expensive suit who looked like he'd never spent a day outside a climate-controlled environment. His hair was perfectly styled, his skin artificially youthful, and his eyes held the cold calculation of someone accustomed to treating human lives as statistics. "Mr. Stellan," the man said without turning around. "Dr. Moore. I've been expecting you. Who are you?" Milo demanded, his hand moving to the pistol at his hip. "Jonathan Reeves, Chief Executive Officer of Atmospheric Solutions Corporation." The man finally turned, revealing a smile that never reached his eyes. "And the architect of the most successful weather control experiment in human history." Lex moved toward one of the data terminals, her tablet already connecting to the system. "Experiment," she said, her fingers flying across the interface. "You've turned an entire region into a laboratory." "The drought zone was already dying," Reeves replied casually. "Climate change, overfarming, aquifer depletion, the natural systems were collapsing anyway. We simply accelerated the process and introduced a controlled solution." On the holographic display, the nanite concentrations pulsed like a heartbeat across the map. Milo could see how the artificial rain patterns had shaped settlement locations, trade routes, and population movements over the past 5 years. "You made me into your puppet," Milo said, anger building in his voice. "We made you into a god," Reeves corrected. "People worship you, depend on you, organize their entire lives around your presence. Do you have any idea how much power that represents?" Lex looked up from her terminal, her face pale. "I've found the deployment schedules. They're planning to expand the program to 12 more regions across the continent. Millions of people. Billions, eventually," Reeves said with satisfaction. "Why should weather be subject to the chaos of natural systems when it can be managed by rational corporate planning? Every drop of rain scheduled, every cloud optimized for maximum agricultural yield, every settlement precisely positioned for optimal resource extraction." Milo pulled out his pistol, but Reeves didn't seem concerned. "Kill me if you like," he said. "The system is automated now. The nanites will continue their work whether I'm alive or dead." "But why the deception?" Milo demanded. "Why not just implement the technology openly? Reeves laughed, a cold sound that echoed through the chamber. Would you have voluntarily participated in an experiment that might kill millions of people? Would any government have approved a program that turned their citizens into test subjects? He gestured to the holographic display. This way, we gathered 5 years of invaluable data while maintaining complete deniability. You were never an employee. You were just a concerned citizen trying to help his community. You bastard, Milo snarled. I'm a visionary, Reeves corrected. Do you have any idea how much money governments will pay for guaranteed weather control? How much power comes with the ability to create droughts or floods on demand? This isn't just about rain, Mr. Stellan, it's about controlling the fundamental systems that determine where people can live, what they can grow, and how many of them can survive. But we can stop them, Lex said, her voice tight with concentration as she worked at the terminal. The nanites have a self-destruct protocol. If I can access the command codes. Alarms suddenly filled the chamber as security forces flooded in through multiple entrances. Milo opened fire, taking cover behind one of the server racks as bullets sparked off the electronic equipment around him. Lex continued working at the terminal, her fingers moving frantically across the interface. The codes are encrypted, she shouted over the gunfire. I need more time. Director Vasquez appeared among the security forces, her weapon trained on Milo. Stand down, Stellan. You're fighting for a dying world. We're offering a better one. A world where you control who lives and who dies. Milo fired back, his shot forcing Vasquez to take cover. Reeves watched the battle with detached interest, as if he were observing an experiment in human behavior. Fascinating, he murmured. Even when presented with the truth, people choose destruction over progress. Lex suddenly cried out in triumph. I'm in. But the self-destruct requires biometric confirmation from an authorized user. She looked at Milo desperately. You're registered in the system as a primary operator. You need to confirm the command. Milo fought his way to the terminal, taking a bullet in the shoulder that spun him around but didn't stop him. He pressed his palm to the biometric scanner just as corporate security forces closed in around them. Nanite's self-destruct sequence initiated, the system announced in a calm electronic voice. All active nanites will cease function in 60 seconds. Reeves's composed expression finally cracked. You don't understand what you've done. Without the nanites, the natural precipitation cycles will take decades to recover. The entire region will become uninhabitable. Maybe, Lex said, grabbing her backpack and moving toward an emergency exit. But at least it will be naturally uninhabitable. The countdown reached 0, and across the drought zone, billions of nanites suddenly stopped functioning. The artificial clouds that had sustained the region for 5 years began to dissipate, and the sky cleared for the first time since Milo's gift had begun. 6 months later, Milo stood on the ridge overlooking what had once been Haven's Rest. The settlement was abandoned now, its buildings empty and slowly being reclaimed by the desert. But in the distance, he could see something that made his heart lift, a line of green on the horizon where natural vegetation was beginning to return. The transition had been brutal. Without artificial rain, most of the drought-zone settlements had been forced to relocate. Thousands of people had packed up their lives and migrated to regions where water still flowed naturally. Some had died in the exodus, unable to complete the journey or unwilling to abandon the only homes they'd ever known. But the land was healing. Lex emerged from a small research station they'd built on the ridge, carrying her tablet and a cup of coffee made from actual rainwater, natural rain that had fallen the night before for the first time in years. The atmospheric readings are encouraging, she reported. Natural cloud formation is returning faster than we predicted. The ecosystem is more resilient than Reeves gave it credit for. Milo nodded, though his expression remained somber. Any word from the settlements? New Haven is thriving, they found natural springs in the eastern valleys. Clearwater merged with 3 other communities and established a sustainable farming cooperative. And Marcus Webb sends his regards. Lex sat down beside him on a boulder that served as an informal bench. People are adapting, Milo. They're stronger than any of us realized. And Reeves? Still in corporate custody, awaiting trial for crimes against humanity. Though I suspect he'll find a way to spin this as a noble experiment that was simply ahead of its time. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sunset paint the sky in colors that seemed more vivid than Milo remembered from his years as a cloud seeder. The device that had once defined his identity now sat in Lex's laboratory, a relic of an era when men had tried to play God with the weather. "Do you ever regret it?" Lex asked. "Giving up the power to bring rain?" Milo considered the question. For 5 years, he had been the most important person in the drought zone, the man who could turn desert into garden with the press of a button. Children had looked at him with wonder, adults had sought his blessing, and entire communities had reorganized themselves around his presence. But that power had been built on a lie that was slowly killing the very people he'd thought he was saving. "No," he said finally. "I regret being fooled by it. But I don't regret ending it." A cool breeze stirred across the ridge, carrying with it the scent of distant rain. Natural rain, formed by natural processes, falling where it chose rather than where corporate algorithms determined it should. It was the most beautiful smell Milo had ever experienced. As darkness fell over the healing landscape, he and Lex made their way back to the research station, where they would continue their work documenting the region's recovery. It would be a long process, measured in years rather than months, but for the first time since his gift had appeared on his doorstep, Milo felt genuinely hopeful about the future. The clouds would return when they were ready. The rain would fall when the time was right. And the people who had learned to survive in an artificial desert would find ways to thrive in a world that was finally, truly, free.